Good morning, everybody. We convene this hearing, the third in our series of oversight hearings on the federal budget. Today, we will examine the adequacy of the Department of Energy's implementation of the President's promise to conduct a, quote, line-by-line review of the federal budget. At this time of financial distress, the goal of this pledge must be to eliminate unnecessary, duplicative, or wasteful government programs, to cut costs and do more with less. This hearing aims to determine the results of the DOE's efforts to cut spending and to help DOE find more spending cuts and savings. Over the past year and a half, this subcommittee has conducted a rigorous oversight of the programs administered by DOE, including those that received a boost in funding under the Recovery Act. From the Solyndra debacle and the Loan Guarantee Program to DOE's role in the selection of 1603 program, this subcommittee has been seeking transparency and accountability in DOE's Recovery Act spending. The American people feel the pain at the pump, as I'm sure many members are hearing directly from their constituents every day. The average national price of gasoline, regular gasoline, is nearly $4. Compounding this pain, DOE, the custodian of literally billions of dollars in Recovery Act funding, has all too often taken its eye off job creation, drawn instead to high-risk ventures with known questions over commercial viability. Rather than gambling in the casino of risky green energy investments, DOE should be using taxpayers' dollar prudently to help get Americans back to work while assuring them reliable access to affordable energy. The President's fiscal year 2013 budget requests $27.2 billion for DOE, roughly $856 million increase, or 3.2% increase over the past fiscal year 2012 enacted level. To put this in context, this is up from a departmental budget of about $17 billion in the year 2000, just over a decade ago, and reflects an increase of about 60%. This, of course, does not include a $35 billion that DOE has received under the Recovery Act in recent years. DOE at present is an agency of nearly 15,000 federal employees and 100,000 contractors. Inspector General's report on management challenges from last year discusses options to achieve operational efficiency and cost savings at the DOE. While DOE has undertaken a number of new management initiatives intended to increase operational efficiencies, much more obviously needs to be done. Some of the Recovery Act's most costly programs are DOE-administered programs. However, criminal investigations, poor performance, and reported waste have made the hallmarks of the Loan Guarantee Program, Advanced Research Project Agency, Energy, the Weatherization Assistance Program, and the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Loan Guarantee Program, according to the IG and GAO. This committee, along with the IG and GAO, will continue to work at keeping these programs functioning as Congress intended, while operating at not one penny above what is required to fulfill their core missions. This committee must remain deeply and regularly engaged with the agencies within its jurisdiction, including DOE, as they define their priorities, identify their needs, and set their goals for the year ahead. So, my colleagues, today we will look at the actual results of DOE's effort to meet the President's pledge to comb through the federal budget and cut spending. The committee has learned, for example, that DOE chose not to heed the President's April 2009 order to Cabinet Secretaries to identify a combined $100 million in budget cuts by July 2009. GAO has also recently identified 700 renewable energy initiatives across the federal government, 92 of which are housed at DOE. At a time when the President is requesting an increase in funding for DOE's renewable energy programs, can anyone at DOE certify that there is no redundancy among these 92 initiatives? To learn more about DOE's efforts, we will take testimony today from the Director of the Office of Budget at DOE, Chris Johns, the Inspector General of DOE, Gregory Friedman, and Director of Natural Resources and Environment at GAO, Frank Rusko. These individuals and their staff have conducted rigorous oversights and audits of EPA for many years, so I welcome our witnesses this morning. This subcommittee and the committee as a whole have no more crucial task, my colleagues, than to work with agencies such as the Department of Energy to ensure that they have the tools they need to realize the aims for which they have been authorized to expend a finite set of federal resources. And with that, I recognize yield to Mr. Waxman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gett, for allowing me to go ahead with my opening statement out of order. I welcome this hearing today. No one, Republican or Democrat, should be in favor of wasteful federal spending. If we can identify ways the department can save money without jeopardizing its mission, we all should support those changes. At the same time, we also need to recognize the Department of Energy has a vital mission in developing new clean energy technologies. Congress should be doing more to support these initiatives. Our economic future depends on building the clean energy industries of tomorrow. Unfortunately, the Republican budget that the House passed last month is stuck in a fossil fuel past. It would all but wipe out DOE's clean energy initiatives. The Democratic committee staff this morning released a supplemental memo that analyzes the impact of the Republican budget on clean energy programs, and I'd like to ask that this be made part of the record.
Mr. Waxman, can we review it first?
Certainly.
Yeah. If you'll give, your staff will give it to us, and then we'll let you know for sure.
The findings of this memo reveal exactly how much damage the Republican budget would do to DOE's mission of developing clean and renewable energy technology. It slashes discretionary spending for energy programs by over 50% next year. While the Republican budget avoids many of the specifics we need to tally up the damage, it's clear that it targets key clean energy initiatives. It repeals funding for the Advanced Technology Vehicles Manufacturing Program, a program that helps the auto industry to improve the fuel efficiency of cars and develop next-generation advanced batteries for electric cars. It halts DOE loan guarantees programs that are creating jobs and funding innovative renewable energy projects like wind farms and geothermal power facilities. It eliminates funding the Western Area Power Administration is using to build transmission lines to deliver renewable energy to the places it is needed, like a 725-mile transmission line to deliver energy from wind from Wyoming to the southwest. And while the Republican budget calls for massive cuts to important clean energy programs, it also protects massive tax breaks for oil companies. Under the Republican budget, oil companies earning record profits would receive $40 billion worth of tax breaks over the next decade. But hell, it's only money. American families are struggling. Strike that last. American families are struggling at the pump, and the Republican solution is to give oil companies earning billions of dollars more tax breaks. Think about these priorities. While the rest of the world is rushing to develop clean energy sources that protect the environment and the health of our children, we're continuing to squander taxpayer money on the oil industry. Our climate pays the price as well. There is a strong scientific consensus that climate change is real and it's happening now, but my Republican colleagues continue to ignore and deny this reality and passed a budget that would only make the problems worse. Mr. Chairman, at hearings last month, Secretary Chu made the compelling economic case for investment in renewable energy, but the Republican budget sets our country back decades in the effort to develop clean, renewable energy technologies that will create millions of jobs and power the economy of the future. The Republican vision represents a huge mistake. Our energy future can't depend on outmoded thinking or technologies. I want to yield back the balance of my time. I hope at the appropriate time, after the Republican staff has had a chance to review our request, that you will make our request for the record into effect.
For sure. Gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Chairman Emeritus, Mr. Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I give my prepared...
For 4 minutes.
Okay, I thought, okay, and then I'll give a minute to Ms. Blackburn, is that right? Yeah. Before I give my brief statement on this issue, I want to comment on Chairman Waxman's statement. In spite of all our faults with our energy policy, gasoline prices, $4 a gallon, are way too high, but they're less than half what they are in Europe. They're a lot less than they are in Japan. Natural gas prices at the wellhead are below $2 an MCF. That's lower than they were under the 1978 Natural Gas Policy Act that Mr. Waxman and Mr. Dingell helped pass that regulated wellhead prices. We have the most free market-based, private incentivized energy sector in the world, and because of that, our energy prices are the most competitive in the world. So in spite of all our faults, we must be doing something right in this country. And if the Obama administration would get out of the way and allow the private sector to operate on federal lands in an environmentally friendly way, we'd do even better. But today we're here, Mr. Chairman, to look at the Department of Energy's budget. This is a recurring hearing. It needs to be done. Way back in 1981 and 82, I was a White House fellow at the Department of Energy, and I can't remember exactly if it was in December or January, December of 81 or January of 82, but Dave Stockman was the director of the Office of Management and Budget, and Ronald Reagan was president, and the Department of Energy had sent its proposed budget over to OMB for review, and OMB had sent it back and said that more needed to be cut. Now, this is when the whole federal budget was less than $100 billion, or less than $1 trillion, excuse me, less than $1 trillion. And I don't remember what Department of Energy's budget was then, but I'm going to say $3 or $4 billion. In any event, the Secretary of Energy, James B. Edwards, had a meeting with all of his assistant secretaries, and he went around the room and he asked each one of them, we have to cut. Can you cut some money? And this is the Reagan cabinet. Not one assistant secretary, Mr. Chairman, said they could cut a penny. Not one. Not one. Now, I was a White House fellow, and I was sitting in the back, and the secretary turned to me, and he said, well, maybe my White House fellow can find some savings. And being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and not knowing the difference, I said, well, I think I can. And I'll continue that story at the next hearing. I'm not going to tell you what I did, but in any event, today we're here at the same thing. Today, the Department of Energy's budget is much larger than it was way back then. They've got $35 billion in stimulus. They're going to receive another $27 billion next year in stimulus funding. They have a renewable energy program that's in shambles. We all know about Solyndra. They have a 1705 loan guarantee programs that almost every company that they've given money to is on the watch list. They've got a $10 billion 1603 program for green energy jobs. It just goes on. And yet, as you just pointed out in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, they have not been responsive to efforts to cut their budget. Hopefully we can encourage them today and find ways across the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, to help save some money in the Department of Energy's budget. With that, I want to yield the balance of my time to Mrs. Blackburn of Tennessee.
I thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding. We welcome all of you here, and I think many of us are looking for ways to make certain that the taxpayer dollar is well tended and that they feel like they are getting some value from the federal government. All too many people do not think that way now. Your budget has increased $10 billion over the past 10 years, and this is a lot of money. The President's addendum to the budget with cuts, consolidations, and savings calls for $467 million in cuts and $249 million in savings from DOE. So I've introduced a bill, the Consolidate Heavy-Handed and Outdated Program Act. We call it the CHOP Act. We're doing this because there are problems with loans. We do feel like the EPA and DOE could be combined into one department called the Department of Energy and Environment. And we think that there's misplaced priorities and misguided activity at DOE and EPA. Our goal is to help save some of this money and to help get this department on the right track. Priorities are reflected in your budget. They're reflected in your time management. It is no secret that we all have concerns, and we have those concerns based on what we see as wanting what is best for our nation. Yield back.
Lady yields back. We recognize a ranking member from Colorado, Mr. Gett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is the third detailed budget hearing we've had on the DOE budget and spending decisions this Congress, and I hope it's productive because I'm just as interested in wiping out waste and mismanagement at DOE or any agency as anybody else on this committee. So I just want to say one thing as this hearing starts. It's important to maintain a sense of perspective because DOE does have some good news. DOE's Recovery Act Clean Energy Initiatives funded over 20,000 projects nationwide through tax cuts or cash assistance for clean energy manufacturing and production. And with Recovery Act funding, DOE reduced the nation's nuclear waste footprint by 69%, or 641 square miles. The weatherization program helped more than 650,000 low-income families improve their homes' energy efficiency and save money over energy bills. And the DOE loan guarantee program supported over 60,000 jobs, and the Recovery Act supported thousands more, helping most of America get through this bad recession. And also, contrary to what Ms. Blackburn said, during the Bush administration, the core DOE budget increased by 16%. During the Obama administration, from fiscal year 2009 to 2012, the core DOE budget, not including these stimulus funds I just talked about, decreased by 22.18%. So it's important to put that into perspective. But this is not to say there isn't room for improvement at DOE or that some DOE programs don't need further examination. The GAO and the Inspector General, as we will hear, have looked carefully at the DOE Recovery Act programs, and they found some areas where management and monitoring needs to improve. I commend GAO and the IG for taking a hard look at these programs and identifying areas for improvement, and I encourage my colleagues across the aisle to use these assessments to help find ways to improve DOE programs, not to use these findings as a partisan sword to try to skewer the administration for political points. And it's important to note that, as this committee well knows, the GAO has had long-standing concerns about DOE's financial management. DOE's environmental management program has been a part of GAO's high-risk series since 1990. And so while the Obama administration has made improvements, they've made the agency more transparent and increased accountability, but DOE's problems go back decades, and so we can't fix it all in 3 years. We need to continue to try to fix it. We also need to look at where DOE is going, not just where they've been. The GAO and the DOE Inspector General will tell us that DOE has responded to these concerns raised in their investigations and audits, learned from its mistakes, and made improvements as they continued to spend Recovery Act funds to improve the economy and provide new incentives for the development and deployment of clean and renewable energy. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from DOE how they have responded to the concerns raised by these auditors. Now, instead of somehow trying to tie higher gas prices to the DOE budget, I think what we should do on both sides of the aisle is to discuss long-term solutions to gas prices and the threat of climate change. As gas prices continue to rise, we need to think of ways to creatively reduce our dependence on foreign oil. So to do that, we can't just say, okay, let's have market-based solutions. We have to come up with a comprehensive, multi-pronged, long-term approach using all energy sources to ensure that we're energy efficient and energy independent. Other nations are already doing this, and we can't be left behind. We should be at the front of a renewable energy revolution that uses traditional fuels to transition. And so I hope we can have all of these conversations as we go forward, Mr. Chairman. I know Ms. Christensen has some things she wants to say, and so at this time I'll yield a minute or the balance of my time to Ms. Christensen.
I think you need your mic closer.
Thank you. Although I must say that this does feel like deja vu all over again, this being at least the third meeting, as Congresswoman DeGette said, in a series relating to line-by-line budget review of this agency. And it's really unclear what we're trying to accomplish here. The alleged intent is to identify wasteful, duplicative, and excessive spending, in addition to assisting DOE to identify and prioritize further targets for cuts. Instead, however, it reflects the disappointing state of this Congress as once again we're ignoring the true concerns of the American people by failing to act on the most critical bread and butter issue of our times, jobs and the economy. The course that we are now on will in no way create the jobs necessary to help our unemployed, will not strengthen our environmental protections, reduce the cost of gasoline, or safeguard the health of our constituents. Further cuts will not take us one step closer to clean air or clean water or a lower unemployment rate. It is still my hope, though, that we can somehow turn these hearings into constructive dialogues about the true costs and benefits of public investment in DOE operations. And that does also, of course, include critically analyzing areas where DOE can further President Obama's directive to be even more vigorous in efforts to find savings by performing in an even more efficient and cost-effective manner, as I'm sure you will hear from the DOE employees here.
Your time
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to have a brief opening statement.
As you know, I'm speaking now to our witnesses. The testimony that you're about to give is subject to Title 18, Section 1001 of the United States Code. When holding an investigative hearing, this committee has a practice of taking testimony under oath. Now, do you have any objection to testifying under oath? No. The Chair then advises you that under the rules of the House and the rules of the committee, you are entitled to be advised by counsel. Do you desire to be advised by counsel during your testimony today? If not, if you please rise and raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. Do you swear the testimony that you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. And now you may give your 5-minute summary of your written statement. And Mr. Roscoe, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Chairman Stearns, Ranking Member DeGette, and members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss budget trends at the Department of Energy as well as observations from GAO's recent reports on selected DOE programs and activities. Recent years have seen significant growth in funding for DOE, particularly in programs that received funding from the 2009 American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. GAO has reported on such DOE programs in response to congressional mandates and requests from members of Congress. My testimony today provides details about the budget trends and aspects of the performance of key DOE programs and activities. In the remainder of my oral remarks, I will highlight 3 such programs. The first is the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy, or ARPA-E. ARPA-E was created by Congress in the America Competes Act of 2007, but did not receive appropriations until 2009 when it received $0.4 billion of Recovery Act funding. Subsequently, the program has received appropriations in 2011 and 2012. GAO reported on this program in February 2012 and found that the program was generally following its mandate to fund projects with high-risk, high-reward profiles and that the private sector would be unlikely to fund on its own. We also found that the program could do more to identify and verify information on applicants' prior private funding and recommended that ARPA-E provide additional reporting guidance to applicants and also require applicants to provide letters from investors explaining why these projects could not have been funded by private investors. ARPA-E agreed with GAO's recommendations and has begun to implement them. Secondly, DOE's Weatherization Assistance Program is a long-standing program that has generally operated on a budget in the neighborhood of $225 million per year, the vast majority of which is distributed to states and other recipients to help low-income families reduce their energy bills by making long-term energy efficiency improvements to their homes. This program received a $5 billion infusion from the Recovery Act and initially experienced difficulties in scaling up its distribution of money to recipients. For example, we reported in 2010 that states and other recipients of weatherization funds had encountered difficulties in understanding and meeting program requirements. These problems delayed the distribution of money for the first several quarters of 2009. GAO recommended that DOE, among other things, clarify its production targets and funding deadlines and generally improve its communication with recipients. DOE took some steps to improve the clarity of its guidance and communication, and despite the slow start, we reported in December 2011 that the states and other recipients had access to most of the Recovery Act funds for weatherization and were on target to exceed weatherization goals. However, some recipients were unable to meet the original spending deadline set by DOE of March 31, 2012. And DOE has recently announced that it will allow recipients the opportunity to modify the original deadline to gain additional time to spend the Recovery Act money. Lastly, DOE's Loan Guarantee Program was created under the Energy Policy Act of 2005 to provide loan guarantees to innovative energy technologies that, among other things, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As initially established, the long-term expected cost of the loan guarantees was required to be paid for by loan recipients. The program issued its first solicitation for loan guarantee applications and several more solicitations starting in 2006. However, it did not close its first loan until September 2009. By that time, the program had received $2.5 billion in Recovery Act appropriations to pay for the expected costs of program loans with a deadline for breaking ground of September 30, 2011. As of that deadline, DOE had spent approximately $2.1 billion of the Recovery Act appropriations to pay the costs of approximately $15 billion of loans, primarily for solar, wind, geothermal, and biomass projects. The remaining $0.4 billion in Recovery Act money went back into the Treasury. In several reports on the Loan Guarantee Program, GAO found numerous problems, including failure to establish performance metrics that match the goals established by the program, as well as poorly documented processes and procedures that in some cases have led to applicants being treated inconsistently and that have opened the program up to criticism about its loan-making decisions. I will end my oral remarks here, but I will be happy to answer any questions the subcommittee may have about these and other DOE programs discussed in my written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member DeGette, members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify at your request on the work of the Office of Inspector General and our efforts to promote economy and efficiency in the nation's $27 billion annual investment in the Department of Energy's wide-ranging set of missions and functions. During the last several years, we have issued over 200 reports identifying ways to improve operational efficiency and to reduce costs at the Department. Through these reviews, we identified millions of dollars in questionable and unsupported costs. Since 2009, a major focus of our work has been the Department's expenditure of over $35 billion in additional funding from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The Recovery Act also increased the Department's loan guarantee authority to over $50 billion. This massive new funding stream strained resources, stretched the existing infrastructure, and required the establishment of new programs on an expedited basis. Our work in this area, which identified both successes and failures, raised what we consider to be important issues regarding the prudent expenditure of taxpayer-provided funds. These were reported in our January 2012 report on Recovery Act lessons learned and best practices. My focus today, however, is on how the Department of Energy can successfully transition from its historic levels of funding, including the funding provided under the Recovery Act, to the more likely constrained budget levels of the future. In this regard, we develop and publish annually a list of the Department's most significant management challenges. These are issues which, in our view, warrant the attention of the Department's senior managers. The full version of my testimony discusses these challenges specifically. Our Management Challenges Report for 2012 highlighted operational efficiency and cost savings as the Department's preeminent management challenge. As part of this process, we presented for consideration 5 high-dollar value initiatives, all with potential for large payoffs in terms of reducing costs and enhancing corporate economy and efficiency. These included the following. First, apply the strategic planning and program analysis disciplines used in the recent Energy Technology Quadrennial Technology Review to the Department's entire $11 billion per year research, development, and technology portfolio. The purpose being to ensure the portfolio is first, managed effectively, second, funded on a priority basis, and third, meeting current policy directions. Secondly, eliminate separate National Nuclear Security Administration overhead functions that duplicate existing departmental operations. Third, consolidate or realign the Department's 16 federally funded research and development centers. The Department currently spends in excess of $10 billion per year on the FFRDCs, including about $3.5 billion per year in overhead administrative expenses. We question whether the proportion of funds dedicated to overhead administration makes sense and whether such expenditures can be sustained, especially in an austere budget environment. Fourth, reprioritize the Department's $250 billion environmental remediation effort by adopting a triage approach in which taxpayers are asked to fund essentially only those projects with a near-term impact on health, safety, and environment. And finally, consolidate the more than 25 separate protective force contract instruments, which are at the core of the Department's $1 billion per year expenditure for physical security at its sites and facilities. These initiatives represent significant change to the status quo and to existing interests. As a consequence, we recognize and we're realistic about the fact that implementation would be extremely difficult. For example, any meaningful reduction in Department of Energy operational costs will require deep and painful staff downsizing of the Department's more than 110,000 federal and contractor personnel. Further, the Department's laboratory system has a rich history of service to the nation. Any material change in the current laboratory structure will be controversial, with significant local economic consequences and, frankly, political ramifications. To its credit, the Department has undertaken a number of management efforts intended to increase operational efficiency. These are briefly discussed in my full testimony. The realities of the budget situation, it seems to us, provide the Department with a unique opportunity to reassess its mission, reevaluate operating policies and organizational structures, and to examine new contractual approaches. We are hopeful that the steps outlined in our Management Challenges report will aid in this regard. We look forward to working with the Department and the Congress in addressing these issues. This concludes my statement. I'm pleased to answer any questions that the subcommittee may have.
Thank you for your statement. Mr. Johns, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member DeGette, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity.
Do you have your mic on?
My apologies.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the monitoring oversight efforts related to developing the Department of Energy's fiscal year 13 budget request and the effective implementation of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. I'd like to provide you a summary of my written testimony and respectfully request that the full testimony be entered into the record.
By unanimous consent, so ordered.
Thank you, sir. As Budget Director for the Department of Energy, my role is to oversee the development and implementation of the Department's budget for the purposes authorized and appropriated by Congress. Through the application of sound budget and financial management, the Department is committed to making the most productive use of taxpayers' dollars. The Department of Energy is steadfast in its commitment to produce annual budgets that reflect the nation's highest priorities, apply public resources wisely, and execute those resources effectively and efficiently. We review our financial status carefully, conduct senior-level reviews of performance, and report our monthly balances to select congressional committees.
So the contract
We assess the availability of balances from prior year appropriations, using them where appropriate to offset requests for new budget authority and to respond to emerging programmatic needs. Our annual budget formulation efforts reflect our commitment to the wise use of public resources. Our program offices start preparing budget requests more than a year before they are submitted to Congress. The Office of Budget then coordinates a comprehensive corporate review chaired by senior department officials during the summer months, which results in a budget for submittal to the Office of Management and Budget in the fall and then to you in February. Annually, each program's budget is built and reviewed, including an in-depth analysis of program priorities on a line-by-line basis, proposed trade-offs, including use of any available balances, and an analysis of cross-cutting subjects. During this process, the formulation material is analyzed to ensure proper coordination and to eliminate duplication where possible. Your committee has heard Secretary Chu testify to the administration's priority of promoting economic growth and strengthening national security using an all-of-the-above strategy that develops every source of American energy. The President wants to fuel our economy with domestic energy sources while increasing our ability to compete in the global clean energy race. Guided by that presidential vision, the Department's 2011 Strategic Plan, and our inaugural Quadrennial Technology Review, our FY13 budget request of $27.2 billion invests in three broad priorities: accelerating the transformation of America's energy system and securing U.S. leadership in clean energy technologies, investing in mission-relevant science and innovation to promote our nation's economic prosperity, and keeping Americans safe by enhancing nuclear security through defense, nonproliferation, and environmental cleanup. We can achieve these priorities through a continuing commitment to fiscal responsibility and management excellence. On Recovery Act, our Recovery Act investments, as passed by Congress in February 2009, are putting Americans back to work, making our homes and businesses more energy efficient, increasing the use of clean and renewable electricity, cutting our dependence on oil, and modernizing the electric grid. As these clean energy projects continue over the coming months, we will continue to see jobs added in local communities, further fueling our economic recovery. The Department of Energy received $35.7 billion in Recovery Act funding. Included in this amount were $33.2 billion in contracts, grants, reimbursable work, and borrowing authority, and $2.5 billion in 1705 credit subsidy. Oversight of the Recovery Act has been a top priority for the Department. Even before the Recovery Act was passed, the Department took steps to anticipate agency demands for the management and oversight of proposed funding. We created a tiered implementation plan from the Department to individual programs, defining projected results and specific timelines. DOD uses these plans to measure our own performance and to trigger corrective actions if a project is found to be diverting from this plan. As we established the Recovery Act procedures, the Department, with the help of the Inspector General, anticipated the need for heightened oversight. The Inspector General conducted a number of preventative audits up front, documenting issues they identified over the last decade in any program receiving funds under the Recovery Act. The review supported our development of comprehensive risk management plans for each program. Before any Recovery Act awards were issued, the Department required the submission of detailed risk plans for every designated Recovery Act project, over 150 in total. We also analyzed all relevant IGA and GAO reports, including those focused on similar programs at other agencies, and incorporated those lessons learned. The Recovery Act has improved the Department's capacity to make sound decisions efficiently and to resolve issues in real time. Most importantly, the increased emphasis on transparency and accountability will improve the oversight of programmatic funding into the future. Mr. Chairman, I would again like to thank you for inviting me to testify today on behalf of the Department of Energy, and I look forward to answering your questions.
I thank the panel, and I'll start with my questions. Mr. John, you're the main man. You're the director of the Office of Budget at the Department of Energy, so my questions will start with you. So I understand it, in the year 2000, the budget of the DOE was roughly $17 billion. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And the budget for 2013 is roughly $27.2 billion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it increased over last year by 3.2%, roughly?
Yes, sir.
But that amount does not include the $35.7 billion in DOE has received from the 2009 Recovery Act. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as I go back and look at the number of employees you had in 2000, you had roughly 15,007 at the Department of Energy. Is that correct? In the year 2000?
I don't know that particular number.
And in the year 2011, you had roughly 14,600. Is that approximately correct?
Yes, sir.
And the number of contractors during this period has stayed the same? Is that roughly inaccurate?
That's my understanding.
Okay, which is about 100,000. Is that correct? Yes. So you had a $10 billion increase over this period of time. It's roughly 5% every year. Incidentally, during that 5% increase every year, from 2008, 9, and 10, when we had the critical recession, did the Department of Energy increase their budget every year? Yes or no? I assume they did.
It was relatively flat.
Like 3 or 4%?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, 3 or 4%. Okay, if you increase your budget over this year by $10 billion, and the number of employees stayed roughly the same, the number of contractors stayed the same, then the question is, where is the money going? Despite the relatively stable workforce, where is that $10 billion going? If it's not contractors, not employees, where is it going?
Yes, sir. Part of the increase over that time, and I would need to get back to you with specifics line by line, but in general, part of that increase is the increase in the cost of and the the infrastructure that we're...
So you're saying everything is inflation?
No, sir, not everything is inflation.
I mean, what's the reason?
It's increases in the infrastructure that we're buying and paying for, the cost of that. We're building new capabilities, new technologies.
And you did this without increasing the contractors or the number of employees?
I'd need to get back to you.
Okay. I have here Executive Order 13589. It was issued on November 9, 2011. Are you aware with it? If not, I can give you a copy.
Yes, sir.
In this case, the President instructed all federal agencies to establish a plan for reducing the combined costs associated with travel, employee information, technology devices, printing, motor vehicles, fleet, and promotional items. And the executive order required an answer submitted to the Office of Management and Budget within 45 days of this order. Has the Department of Energy done this? Yes or no?
Yes.
We have not seen it. Can you submit it to us? Do you have it with you?
I don't have it with me right now.
Because we have not seen it. Mr. Roscoe, have you seen it?
No.
Mr. Friedman, have you seen it?
I have, Mr. Chairman.
And when did you get a copy of it? Do you remember?
I asked for it within the last week, and that's when I received it.
So actually, this whole thing was issued 2011, and it was supposed to be in 45 days of that order. It appears, Mr. Johns, that the Department of Energy did not comply with that 45-day order of this executive order. Is that true?
I need to look back at the dates, but I believe we did, or nearly there. We submitted it in December of...
But Mr. Friedman just got it just recently, a week ago. I mean, I think the point I'm trying to make is we don't see the Department of Energy being compliant with even the executive order which the White House issued and wanted a 45-day response. Mr. Johns, in DOE's November 15, 2000 letter to the committee, you acknowledge that it is absent from the list of 15 agencies that heed the President's April 2009 executive order to Cabinet Secretaries to identify $100 billion in budget cuts by the year 2009. Is that correct?
That's correct, although we have done so internally, even though we were not requested.
But so we have the President's order in 2009, and you have admitting this morning that you did not comply with that in a timely manner. Is that a fair statement?
Well, sir, I would say that the order requires that we submit our plan to OMB, which we have done. So we did comply with that.
You identified $100 million in budget cuts for that year 2009?
I'm sorry, the executive order requiring us, the recent one, 13589, that requires that we submit a plan in 45 days. We submitted that plan to OMB in December of 2011.
Is that possible we could get a copy of that?
Well, let me check on the request.
Okay. Let me ask you now, knowing what you know, when I just asked you questions, are there additional proposed termination or cuts that have not been made that you're proposing in the year 2013, accompanying the President's budget? I mean, here he gave you something in 2009. It appears you didn't comply. You're not even sure you can give us a copy of what you complied with. The people at the witness stand really didn't get a copy. One of Mr. Freeman just got it a week ago. So the question is, are there any additional proposed cuts, termination fees that you are going to apply for the next 2013 budget?
Sir, the budget that we submitted in February of this year included other cuts, included cuts consistent with the executive order, the implementation of the executive order.
Where are these cuts?
You would see them in the program direction lines. That is the
no,
line.
Specifically, are they? Can you tell me what they are?
Happy to.
Just briefly. I won't take too much.
As you identified, there are several areas. I'll highlight a few here. In travel, we were asked, in most of these cases, asked to reduce by 20%. We've identified $12.6 million as the target for reducing travel. We track that progress throughout the year. We've already achieved some savings there.
Would it be safe to say that's the only place you've cut is travel?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
We've made reductions in printing. We've made reductions in advisory services, significant reductions.
And that total is? How much is that total?
The total identified was $473 million over 3 years.
Okay. I thank thee. And my time has expired. The gentlelady from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit confused, frankly, about the DOE budget because I keep hearing you, Mr. Chairman, and others on your side of the aisle talking about the budget, so, Mr. Johns, I know you haven't been at the DOE since 2001, but I just want to, I want to ask you about some of these numbers. Now, what I'm told is in fiscal year 2001, which was the first year of the Bush administration, the DOE enacted budget was $20.1 billion. Is that correct?
Thereabouts. I don't remember the exact number, but yes.
And in the final DOE enacted budget of fiscal year 2009, the DOE budget was $33.8 billion. Is that correct? So that would be about a 65% total increase in the DOE budget under President Bush. Is that correct?
Thereabouts, yes, ma'am.
Now, as I said in my opening statement, the DOE enacted budget, not including the ERA money, which was designed to be a one-time stimulus for the economy, the DOE enacted budget for fiscal year 2012, the core budget was $27.2 billion. Is that correct?
For 2012?
Yeah.
2013, the request is 27.2.
The request for 2013 is, and that's a decrease in the core budget. Is that right?
From the 2009 level?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So under the Bush administration, the DOE budget, not including the ERA money, which came in 2009, it increased 65%, and the DOE budget under President Obama is decreasing around 20%. Is my math correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Go. You wanted to add something?
I was just going to say that part of the increase in the 2009 budget is a one-time ATVM credit subsidy. But
exactly.
Yeah, in general, that's
of about $7.5 billion, exactly. Right? Okay. So now you had talked to the chairman about some of the places that you're cutting, and I just wanted to ask you about some of the other places that you're cutting. In the 2013 budget request, you're proposing eliminating $4 billion in fossil fuel subsidies, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You're proposing cutting funding for nuclear energy activities, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're proposing cutting funds for the DOE Office of Public Affairs and Office of Management. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Offhand, do you know how much you're going to cut in that office?
In those offices specifically, I'd have to get back to you. But overall, in our departmental administration, which is where those two offices lie, we're proposing to cut $45 million.
And here's my question: has the DOE proposed reducing salaries for any of its employees?
I'm not aware of reducing salaries. As with the rest of the federal government, we were under a pay freeze and then had a small increase in 2013.
Okay, and the Inspector General recommended cutting back on certain contractor costs. Has the DOE proposed any contractor cost reductions in its budget request?
I would need to get back to you with specifics, but in general, we have engaged in an effort over the last several years to reduce contracting costs. That's part of the executive order and part of the work that we've been doing.
Okay, and but at the same time, the DOE is trying to figure out strategically where we should invest so that we can become energy independent and that we can support some sectors where maybe we do need some help, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So, like, for example, the DOE budget does not make significant cuts in renewable energy and energy efficiency programs. Is that right?
That's correct.
So do you think that the DOE can do more to increase its efficiency and ability to further our energy goals in this country?
Absolutely.
What other things can we do you think?
Well, we're engaged. Some of these things are small things that will never be highlighted in the budget document, but things that we as in the budget office are doing every day. Other things are efforts engaged in by the programs to reduce, as you suggested, contracting costs, to be more efficient about the work that we do. So we're engaging in those kinds of efforts every day.
Mr. Friedman, one thing you talked about was on some of the ERA money, the DOE really struggled to ramp up so that they could spend that money efficiently. Do you think that they have now been able to disperse those monies efficiently, and are they going to be able to scale down? And if not, what can they do to improve that?
Well, Mr. Gett, the last time I looked at the numbers, which was in the last 10 days or so, virtually all of the $35 billion has been obligated, and only 2/3 of it has been spent. So there's still 1/3 of the ARA money which has not been spent. And we view that as the most important benchmark in terms of spending stimulus funding. We have a disagreement with the department on that analysis. So we think that, but a lot of the impediments that originally existed, after all, it's been 3 years since the passage of the Act, a lot of the impediments have been worked through, and we think they're prepared to spend more efficiently.
And you think they should just get that money, but you don't want them just to throw the money out there. You want them to spend it in an efficient way, right?
It's a Venn diagram.
Exactly.
Spend it quickly, spend it well.
Right.
Put them together.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Texas recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johns, are you a political appointee or civil service?
I'm a civil servant, sir.
Civil servant. Do you have any control over rejecting or approving spending, or is your role merely coordinative and advisory?
It's coordinating and advising. I'm providing recommendations to the senior leadership.
Okay,
on
so
budget
if you see something that you don't think needs to be spent, you can't deauthorize the voucher or refuse to sign it. You could just send a note to the secretary or the assistant secretary and express your concerns. Is that correct?
In the end, that's correct, sir.
Okay. I notice you have it looks like an iPad.
Yes, sir.
Is it hooked up to the internet?
It is, in general, it's not at the moment.
Okay, then why is it there?
Why is it there?
Yeah.
Because I have my testimony on this.
So it's not, I wanted to ask you some questions and have you real time look it up instead of I'll get back to you. So I was hoping it was wired into the internet. And
if you want me to, I'll look it up. I've got my iPad here.
I bet he has the codes quick. And not that you don't, Diane, but I have a feeling it would take you and I a long time just to get the DOE website. Well, my first question is, do you know how much DOE spent on travel last year?
I could do the math for you. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Do either of my other two witnesses know that number?
Okay, I don't know the answer, Mr. Barton, but what's really interesting is that the amount of money spent by the federal employees is a paltry amount compared to the amount of money spent by the facility management contractors of the department. And that's where the big bucks obviously are.
Do you want to put numbers on those? When you say paltry, that's a pretty general term.
I have not looked at the number. My understanding is it's in the $60 million a year range.
$60 million for the contractors?
No, $60 million for the feds.
Oh, that's paltry.
Compared to the contractor.
God help us.
Let me be clear about that.
Okay, if $60 million is paltry, you're saying the contractors spend several hundred million on travel?
I don't have that analysis. I would suspect several hundred million is an understatement.
Can you get it?
I cannot get it easily, no.
You cannot
Johns perhaps can. I cannot.
Mr. Johns can get it.
Yes.
Will you get it and provide it to the members of the committee on both sides of the aisle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many, our numbers show that the Department of Energy has about 15,000 employees that are direct federal employees, Mr. Johns. Do you agree with that number?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
15,000 federal employees that
Yes,
are direct employees of the Department of Energy. Is that a generally good number?
That's approximately right. It's a little bit less, but yes, sir.
I believe committee numbers for vehicles owned by the Department of Energy is also about 15,000. Do you agree with that?
That's part of the reason that we've been focused on, specifically on that issue, on reducing by 35% the number of vehicles that we have in the fleet.
But you do agree that the Department of Energy owns 15,000 vehicles?
I don't know the number.
All right. Give me your best guess.
I'd prefer not to guess about the number of vehicles.
Give me an estimate. They own one? They own 100,000?
I'm not going to be able to give you that answer off the top of my head. I can get back to you on it.
You're not going to get back to me. You know how many vehicles.
Sir, I honestly don't know the number of vehicles.
You've got a pretty good idea. Don't play games.
Sir, I assure you I'm not playing games.
You don't have a clue, and you're the budget manager for the Department of Energy, the approximate number of vehicles? I don't believe that.
Well, that's the case, sir.
You don't have any idea?
No, sir.
Not at all?
No. I can tell you
If I said 10, you can't dispute that. If I said $1 million, you can't dispute it.
Well, I can tell you it's between 10 and $1 million, sir.
Well, that's good. That's a start. Do you dispute that it's about 15,000?
Sir, I can't tell you that that's wrong. I just don't know the answer.
Do you think it's appropriate for the Department of Energy to have approximately one vehicle for every employee, which is about what it is?
It is not appropriate, which is why we've engaged in the effort to reduce the size of the fleet by 35%.
Have you reduced the fleet by one vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Have you reduced it by two?
I believe we have, sir. We've reduced the...
So we know that there are more than two.
Yes, sir.
If you've reduced it by two.
We've reduced the fleet just for headquarters already by 40% this year.
Okay. Does Secretary Chu own a car?
I don't know if he does. He said that he normally gets government travel back and forth to work.
And I want to go on the record, I think the Secretary of Energy should have a government vehicle at his or her disposal. So, well, there'll be some more.
He doesn't ride a bike to work.
Unless he bicycles to work.
He does sometimes, sir.
I know. Well, you will get some more questions, because I don't normally ask civil servants to resign, but if you really don't know a general answer to my question about the number of vehicles, and you're the budget officer, that's inexcusable.
I think, gentlemen, let me just add to his, can you find out by your staff behind you, can they make a call over here so that Mr. Barton can get an answer today? We shouldn't have to wait.
Yes, sir.
Can you do that?
Of course.
Okay. Okay. With that, recognize the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Republican budget, which was passed last month, slashes discretionary spending on energy programs by 57% in 2013. These cuts will derail efforts to make wind and solar power competitive with fossil fuels. The budget also rescinds the unobligated balances in DOE's loan guarantee programs, which fund clean energy projects and support over 60,000 jobs. Mr. Johns, if the department's renewable energy funding were cut in half, what kind of effect would that have on the agency and its ability to fulfill its mission?
Well, it certainly would cut at the core of some of the key initiatives that we've been engaged in as part of this all-of-the-above strategy of reducing the cost of energy to the American people. We obviously, the Congress enacts, or the Congress passes bills, and we would do our best to live under those, but it would certainly have a dramatic impact on our ability to provide those services.
The House Republican budget recommends the repeal of borrowing authority for the Western Area Power Administration, which is bringing renewable energy sources to areas in the western U.S. Mr. Johns, if the Western Area Power Administration's borrowing authority were repealed, how would that affect the agency's ability to modernize transmission lines in the western U.S., and what effect would this have on citizens in those western states?
I can't give you a precise number on the effect on the cost of energy, but it would obviously have an impact on the cost of energy.
Well, wouldn't it undermine the electrical grid in order to promote renewable energy and cost-saving choices for Western consumers?
Well, I know that WAPA has been engaged in an effort to increase reliability, and that's part of what this effort was.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know right now this program is funding a 109-mile transmission line to increase delivery of solar power to consumers in the West. The House Republican budget wants to rescind the unobligated balances of the Advanced Technology Vehicles Manufacturing Loan Program. How would that affect the agency's ability to support breakthroughs in energy-efficient vehicles?
Well, we've certainly used that program in the last several years to increase the capabilities of the auto industry to bring to the market new innovative technologies. So to the extent that we don't have that money, we wouldn't be able to continue that effort.
Well, it would eliminate support for this program, which was passed on a bipartisan basis and helps fund the development of plug-in hybrid and electric vehicles. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
And people complain about high gas prices. If we don't do things like this, we're relying on oil. And the more we're relying on oil, the more we're stuck with the world oil prices, which drive gasoline prices up. We shouldn't let these important programs be cut. The House Republican budget would slash our investments in innovative clean energy technologies. Even worse, the Republican budget doesn't just slash beneficial programs that support renewable energy. It continues to spend almost $40 billion in the next decade in tax subsidies for big oil. If we cut these programs that are funding breakthroughs in wind and solar production and electric vehicles and the electrical grid, we undermine the competitiveness of our country and harm our national security. We need to look to new technologies to power our economy, not to dig our heels in with old technologies and old ways. The U.S. is in a global race to develop new renewable energy technologies that will power the economies of the future. I'm confident that American companies can win this race, but we need to make sure they have the tools they need. In 2009, the Chinese government poured $120 billion into renewable energy, a staggering $45 billion on the electric grid alone, while the U.S. invested just $20 billion overall. Mr. Jones, how much has the department requested for renewable energy initiatives in the 2013 budget?
Well, you'd have to look across. You'd have to look across not just EERE, but we look at several of our programs. The overall renewable energy budget is well into the $3-4 billion range.
And I think that you had requested a 29.1% increase in funding for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy.
Correct.
Okay. What would you
takes it to about 2-3.
What would you do with these additional funds?
Several different programs. One I would particularly want to highlight is the Advanced Manufacturing Initiative, which is designed to increase our ability to compete in the world market, to bring some of the technologies that we're developing here, both at our labs and then in the private sector, and get them commercially ready. So that's one that receives particular increases in this budget.
Well, my time has run out. I want to commend you on your answers to these questions. You seem to know about the job you're required to do. I came in a little late, but it sounded like you didn't know enough about Secretary Chu's driving and whether he drives his own car enough or rides a bicycle, which you said he does occasionally. I don't expect you to know that or any of things off the top of your head, but you can get us the information on any of the questions we've asked you, and I think that is the kind of job that we should expect and commend you for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just tell the ranking member that he was asked total number of cars in the fleet. He didn't know, but he indicated he's going to find out before the hearing's over. Yeah. And with that, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to have the hearing for the panelists to talk about the budget as we're going through.
Is your microphone on?
It's hello.
Yeah. Okay.
Just as we're grappling with budget issues, we're working hard to try to reduce spending, to finally force the government to start living within its means. The tasks that we've been given is to actually start reining some of that in, looking through agencies. And, I know the President said in the past he's going to go line by line through the budget. I question whether or not he has truly carried through on that when you actually look at some of the things in the line items. But I want to ask about some of the specific things that y'all are dealing with. Mr. Friedman, I think you had talked about investigations that are ongoing. Can you share with us at least how many investigations your office is conducting right now?
We have between 300 and 350 potential criminal investigations ongoing at any given time, including the currently.
Okay. Is that across all agencies or just within Department of Energy?
Just within the Department of Energy and grant recipients, contractors, and feds as well.
So just within the Department of Energy, somewhere in the neighborhood of up to 350 criminal investigations?
Well, we don't know how they will turn out, obviously.
But investigations.
Investigations which are carried out with the potential of criminality being involved.
Do you know, are any of these within the loan program? We've had a number of hearings on Solyndra, trying to get in deeper on some of those issues. And in fact, our subcommittee's still not gotten all the answers we've requested from subpoenaing the White House, and hopefully they'll finally comply with all of those requests. Can you tell us if any of these criminal investigations are within the loan program?
Well, both the Department of Justice and my office have publicly acknowledged that there is a criminal investigation ongoing with regard to the Solyndra matter. Beyond that, I really can't comment. It is an active investigation.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I know I've asked, a number of others have asked the Attorney General to look into, especially the subordination of the taxpayer, which we feel violated federal law. Very clearly, it looks from most experts would say there was a violation of federal law. I would hope that the Attorney General would investigate that, because again, you got millions of dollars of taxpayer money that would be at risk if we don't see the Attorney General take that action, and hopefully you're working in conjunction with him to push him to do just that. I want to ask Dr. Rusko, GAO found that government-wide 23 agencies and their 130 sub-agencies implemented nearly 700 renewable energy initiatives in fiscal year 2010. Is that what y'all reported?
Yes, that's correct.
When you look at all of that, did y'all find any duplication?
It took pretty much all of an audit just to identify all of the initiatives, and across so many agencies. We have efforts underway now to drill down in solar energy, wind energy, and battery storage, and we're trying to get a handle on a little bit more detail about where those programs and initiatives may overlap and where there may be some potential duplication, with the hope that that could eventually be eliminated.
Because it seems like with all of the money that was spent, and just in the stimulus, there was about $35 billion spent, many cases on green energy, where the president was just trying to just have photo opportunities to show some victories, and it seemed like a whole lot of money was rushed out the door with very little oversight. We saw billions at the very end of the loan program just pushed out on the final days without the proper due diligence, and many reports have said there was not the proper due diligence, not to mention now with all these overlapping, where you could clearly save millions, possibly higher than millions of dollars. I want to ask Mr. Friedman, you had talked in your testimony about the review that y'all did on the stimulus, and just with so much money rapidly being deployed, I think was your term. You might even talked about teachable moments and the amount of money that was moved through without the ability to properly scrutinize. Can you expand upon that?
Well, I certainly can. In January of this year, we issued our Lessons Learned Best Practices report on the Recovery Act. And although a good portion of the Recovery Act money has yet to have been spent, and we're continuing our work, there were a number of challenges going in. I have cited and was misquoted, I guess, a couple of times that it was comparable to attaching a garden hose to a fire hydrant. The rush of money was just so exceptional in such a short period of time. The institutional challenges and other barriers were really extraordinary. And neither the states nor the federal government were fully prepared to address it.
I appreciate reading that report. One final question. Mr. Johns, last year the President raided about 30 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Number one, how much money did that generate? Number two, what did y'all do with that money? And number three, have y'all replaced that 30 million barrels that was taken away last year just to supposedly try to lower gas prices, which clearly it did not? Can you answer those questions?
The sale last year generated a little over $3 billion in receipts to the government. That money remains in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve account, and a portion of that would be used to buy back the oil at the proper time. As you probably know, the decisions on when to make those purchases are related a lot to... At
today's prices, it may take more than that, looking at oil over $100 a barrel.
Which is why we have not chosen yet to buy that oil back.
Why didn't you do it earlier in the year when the price was lower?
In part because we needed a space. We needed to do some repairs in the caverns, so there were some administrative reasons we wanted to wait. Decisions on when we're going to buy that back, though, are decisions that are not made certainly in the budget office, but made as a part of the decisions on when the oil is available, when it won't affect the market. And as I think you also know, we've made a decision not to buy some of that back, and almost $300 million and using that as savings, that we don't intend to buy back in the next several years.
I hope you'll recognize
Gentleman's time has expired.
Go back to balance of my time.
Yeah. Recognize Ms. Christensen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johns, in your written testimony, you state that DOE received $35.7 billion in Recovery Act funds, and DOE has done a lot with those funds. For example, you state that the agency is supporting over 15,000 clean energy projects across the country, and I really think we should recognize just how effective the Recovery Act has been in lifting up the American economy and creating a new energy economy. Also, at a time when other nations are focusing heavily on aggressively building their green jobs industries, it's vital that America do the same to stay competitive on the global stage. So, Mr. Johns, how many jobs have been supported by DOE's Recovery Act projects? Do you know that?
It's
an approximate number would be fine.
I don't know the specific numbers. Yeah, about 50,000.
Are they
over time?
Are they located in one region or state, or are they spread out across the country?
No, ma'am. And in fact, that was in part the intention of the Recovery Act was to spread those around the country. Weatherization is a good example of that, where we're hiring local contractors all over the country.
Yeah, that weatherization program did more than create jobs, didn't it? I know we were able to take advantage of it in the Virgin Islands. Can you just say a few words about beyond jobs, what the weatherization project was able to accomplish?
Yes, ma'am. Certainly, it's reduced the cost to individuals of their monthly energy bills, and made a pretty substantial reduction in some cases, $100 and more in some places.
Thank you. These Recovery Act programs had important benefits. Nevertheless, we really have to acknowledge that this has not been an easy road for DOE. So, Mr. Friedman and Mr. Rusko, is it fair to say that DOE struggled with implementing some of its Recovery Act programs?
Yes, especially initially, and we've been talking about the weatherization program. There were a lot of hiccups in the early months of that program. Among other things, the law required each state and, in many instances, localities to establish market wages for weatherization workers, and those had not been established, so they had to work to, the states themselves had to work to establish what the market wages were to meet the requirements of the Davis-Bacon Act. There were also some informational and communication hiccups between DOE. DOE had a hard time communicating to a wider range of recipients and managers, and some of the information that they provided was unclear, and it took them a while to improve that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Friedman, I think you pretty much answered that question before with the hose and the fire hydrant analogy. You wanted to add?
I think that'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Congresswoman, if I could make one quick point on
Sure.
this. The kinds of things that they're identifying here were designed from the beginning. We very much solicited and want this kind of feedback so that we can improve the execution of these projects over time and take them into account as we look at the new budgets.
And so that kind of is my next comment and question, because I commend both GAO and the Inspector General for their work the agencies have done in identifying the problems and providing recommendations to improve DOE program management. But I'd like to ask both Mr. Orozco and Friedman, do you feel that DOE has responded well? Have they acted on your recommendations, and has the program management improved as DOE developed more experience, in your opinion, as well?
By and large, DOE has agreed with most of our recommendations and taken steps to implement them. They've completed implementing quite a number of, especially the ones related to the Recovery Act. We have some instances in which programs have been less willing to adopt our recommendations, and the loan guarantee program is one.
I think that from our vantage point, there's no doubt that there have been a number of our recommendations have been accepted. There have been dramatic improvements in a number of the programs. So while there are some problems still, we think it's largely a good news situation.
Thank you. So, and balance, I really think that despite the management problems, that it's pretty fair to say that DOE's recovery programs provided important benefits to many American workers and families. So, but yet my Republican colleagues continue to claim that the Recovery Act had no value. They continue to talk about cylinders, as you've heard this morning, and proclaim that the loan guarantee program is a failed experiment, which is unwarranted given how much this program has done for American businesses and how important it is to invest in innovation. Mr. Johns, how did the Recovery Act funding help the loan? Would you like to speak about the loan guarantee program a minute and how it helped to support innovative thinkers with ideas for clean energy projects?
Of course. As you've already said, the loan guarantee program has supported. Sorry.
Just finish your question. Finish your question.
Has supported many companies, and we've had many successes in things like batteries and hybrid power and this kind of thing that have been a significant that have significantly improved our ability to compete in the future, bringing these kinds of capabilities that were available to us but were not yet ready for production scale into the production.
Thank you, gentlelady. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier we heard comments about China and its renewables program and how it's working on new energy sources. But I think it's interesting we always talk about China in that regard, but we don't recognize that China doesn't expect over the next couple of decades to have about more than 15% of its power coming from these other sources, and that they continue to build coal-fired power plants because they recognize that between now and sometime in the future when renewable energy comes on board, coal is still going to be a major part of their plan, but in this country, for some reason, we seem to think we can do without coal. So that's just an editorial comment on previous editorial comments. Mr. Johns, here's the question I have following up on Representative Barton's comments. How do you know you're going to be able to reduce, and I may have it wrong, the central office fleet by 40% and the overall fleet by 35% if you don't know how many cars you have in the first place? Because doesn't it make sense that in order to know that you need to reduce 35 cars, you have to know that you have 100 to get to your 35%? Isn't that logical, and do you understand why he's frustrated that you don't know that answer if you're going to throw out numbers about how much you're cutting the fleet, but you don't know how big it is to start with? Doesn't that make sense to you, sir?
Sir, thanks for the opportunity to come back to this. I will say I'm sorry I didn't know the number, but my job is to review the overall budget requests, and I have excellent staff who can get me those numbers. For example, I can confirm that his number, 15,000, is about right for the number of vehicles we have in the fleet right now. I would say that also includes, though, not just private vehicles or not just cars, but it's also trucks to carry nuclear material. It's cherry pickers for the grid, this kind of thing.
I guess the frustration is that you came here today to testify on budget numbers, and you're talking about reducing the fleet, but you don't know how big the fleet is, so it's kind of hard to know whether or not your numbers are accurate on reducing the fleet. That was the point I was trying to make there. Let me ask this of you, Mr. Friedman, if I might. You indicated there's some active investigations going on, and I know you can't tell me anything about that, but I would question in the loan guarantee program 1705, under which Solyndra was made and the other loans were made, if there were a violation, a knowing and willful violation of that section, have you all assessed whether or not there might be, depending on whether or not there was a willful and knowing violation, is there a possibility that there might be criminal sanctions there, or is it, as I have heard previously, that section has no criminal penalty?
I don't know the answer to your question, Mr. Griffith. I'm sorry. I just don't know the answer.
Are you all in a position to give me an answer at a later date, or is that not in your bailiwick?
Not within my purview.
Not within your jurisdiction. It is interesting that you all added the loan guarantee program to your FY 2012 watch list in your November 2011 special report on DOE management challenges. This move is justified in light of the significance of the funds involved in the government's exposure to risk. I guess what I have to say is if the program says that the loan monies are not to be subordinated and then they are subordinated, am I not correct? Isn't it true that that would add substantially to the risk that would have to be assessed if subordination was possible even though the law says otherwise?
Well, Mr. Griffith, I assume that you would not want me to do anything or say anything, nor would you want to provoke a question that would in any way undermine an ongoing investigation. So
Absolutely.
let me pass on that question.
Absolutely. I do not want to interfere with any ongoing investigations. If there is no potential criminal possibility, do you think it would be helpful to add into those sections a civil penalty of, say, $250,000 for a knowing violation of the law?
Well, you know, if I start down this slippery slope, and
I'm talking about going forward. I'm not talking about past.
well, I'll tell you, going forward, I think there are a lot of aspects of the loan guarantee program that where clarification, more precision, would be helpful to everybody, and this may be one of those areas.
Well, I certainly think clarifying that there's a punishment for violating the law is always helpful in that regard. Dr. Rusko, in its March 2012 report, GAO concludes that DOE must fully implement a system of overseeing application review process to ensure accountability for federal resources. Among other things, GAO found that DOE does not have a consolidated system for documenting and tracking its progress in reviewing applications fully implemented at this time. This is obviously a cause for concern. How did the DOE respond to your recommendation that they commit to a timetable to fully implement a consolidated system?
The program did not want to commit to a time frame to do so. We think that that's misguided. We believe that it's extremely important for them to have a centralized way to track all of the applications. We've spent months and months of our audit just tracking down individual documents in sometimes paper form, sometimes spreadsheet form, putting it all together, going back and checking for accuracy. And in the end, we found some problems. It would be hard for the program itself to do appropriate oversight if they don't have these management data, and we found it to be problematic for our own oversight.
And will continue to be problematic if not fixed, am I correct?
That's our belief, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. And the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Castor, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I'd also like to talk about the Department of Energy's weatherization program, because I believe it's been one of the most effective, energy-efficient initiatives run or overseen by the federal government, because it's a partnership with local communities. And I've seen it firsthand in my district in the Tampa Bay area. It provides those cost-efficient upgrades to homes, many from families that don't have a lot of money to put into repairs to their homes. And this has been going on for 34 years, and I understand that over the course of 34 years, we've helped weatherize over 6.3 million homes across America. And then in the recession, the Recovery Act provided another huge punch under weatherization. And this was smart because we were able to put people to work, especially in the construction industry where the jobs the bottom fell out of the economy, and then provide the double whammy benefit of helping put money back into the pocketbooks and the personal budgets of people all across the country. And one of the most effective partnerships I've seen is in the city of St. Petersburg in Pinellas County. In my area, it was run by the Urban League, a nonprofit that had their finger on the pulse of the folks who needed jobs, needed a little training. They were largely in construction industry and not working, hired them, and they did. Imagine the state of Florida, what it means for your air conditioning bill when you can plug the holes around the windows and doors. It saves them, it saves those families a lot of money. So Mr. Johns, how many homes have been made more efficient through the Recovery Act investment under our weatherization assistance initiative?
Approximately 680,000.
680. And I believe I heard you say that the average savings to each of these families was over $430 per year. Is that right?
I've heard that number. I've heard various ranges, but yes.
I think everyone can appreciate those kind of savings. And Mr. Rusko, I noticed in the Government Accountability Office did a report in December 2011. You said that pursuant to the Recovery Act investment in weatherization, 13,000 jobs were created. Is that about right?
That's what was reported, yes.
Okay. By the GAO, reported by the GAO?
It was reported by recipients to OMB.
Okay, and you also made recommendations to the Department of Energy on how to make the initiative more efficient.
Yes, we did.
And in your testimony today, I hadn't seen this before, but you, in the Government Accountability Office testimony, you say that you reported that some grant recipients have been able to exceed their production targets because of a lower average cost of weatherizing homes and lower training and technical assistance expenses than anticipated. So that's good news. You also said the GAO also reported that a long-term weatherization assistance goal is to increase energy efficiency through cost-effective work, and that the Oak Ridge National Laboratory study of March 2010 indicated that energy savings here will likely exceed the program's cost, meaning that every $1 spent on weatherization between 2009 and 2011 would result in almost $2 in energy savings over the useful life of the investment. What did you think of the Oak Ridge Laboratory's assessment that every dollar spent on weatherization results in $2 in savings over the life of the investment?
We did review their study methodology. We think it's sound. Those are preliminary results, and I think they're about to publish a more comprehensive estimate. But we did think that their study approach was very sound.
Well, that's good news for the taxpayer, and it's good news for the folks who got jobs, and it's good news for the people in those homes that are saving money on their energy bills. Now we've run up on a deadline for all of those Recovery Act dollars under weatherization to be spent. The original deadline was March 31st this year. You all mentioned this in your testimony. Can you tell me, explain to folks exactly what that deadline means, and it's been extended until what date?
Some states were unable to spend all their money. Many states actually did before the deadline, but some states were unable to, and OMB issued guidance allowing the money to be spent up through, I'm going to look at Kim, but I think September 30th, 2013. And DOE then has issued revised guidance to the recipients allowing them to apply for modifications of their deadlines.
Okay, so now the burden is on the states to go in and make that application?
Yes, states and other recipients.
Can the recipients do it on their own without having to go through the state or rely on the state?
Each state has to apply to DOE for an extension in order to, or a modification of the deadline in order to spend whatever funds are remaining.
And there's not that much left. How much is left? Do you know?
I think when we last checked, $4.2 billion had been spent. So there's something like $0.6 billion left.
Well, I appreciate.
The lady's time has expired.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go around with the second round of questions, and I'll start with mine. Before I go, I'd like unanimous consent to put in this Executive Order 13589 and the analysis from the Business and Financial News that Obama's green jobs have been slow to sprout. Without objection, so ordered.
Objection. What is the status on Mr. Waxman's unanimous consent request? Okay.
Without a unanimous consent, by unanimous consent, so ordered. My question is to the three of you. I'll start with Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns, in a committee letter of March 15, 2012, the Treasury admitted that, quote, job creation is not one of the statutory requirements for eligibility, and thus it is not a factor in the consideration process with the Section 1603 Recovery Act grants to renewable energy projects. Do you recognize that statement? In other words, basically creating jobs is not one of the missions of the Department of Energy under the Section 1603. The Treasury says that that's not a big mission. Is that? Do you understand that?
Sir, I've heard that comment, but I will say that because 1603 doesn't have a direct budget impact on the Department of Energy, it's not something that I've spent particular time reviewing. I'd be happy to go back.
It's true that Department of Energy, Department of Treasury administers the 1603 program with technical support from the Department of Energy. Isn't that true? And so when they come and say that under statutory requirements, job creation is not a consideration process, I think that's an important fact. Nevertheless, when Secretary Chu was before us, and he was asked questions about this 1603 tax grant program, he says that it's created tens of thousands of jobs in industries such as wind and solar, and he was under oath. Do you remember him saying that?
I do remember him saying
that. Do you think that's true?
I don't have any other basis to judge other than...
We had no way to determine if what he was saying was true. However, recently, there was a released report on Friday, April 6, 2012, from the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, quote, preliminary analysis of the jobs and economic impact of the 1603 program. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware there was a study. Okay.
So we have Secretary Chu saying tens of thousands of new jobs. This report comes out in April talking about it. And DOE didn't, in fact, it went on to say that DOE did not provide any data. There was no data to back up Secretary Chu's claim of tens of thousands of jobs. So basically, you're familiar with this report. This report is contradicting Secretary Chu, saying that tens of thousands of jobs were not created, and yet he goes around and we hear the Democrats over on this side of the aisle keep talking about all these jobs that are created, and the factual report says that they were not. Let me ask Mr. Friedman, are you aware of this report that I just mentioned that came out April 6th?
I am not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are you, Dr. Roscoe?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, let me ask each of you in your best estimation. Do you think Secretary Chu's correct when he said tens of thousands of new jobs were created under the 1603 program? Dr. Roscoe?
We have not looked into that program. We have not received any requests to evaluate that, so I'm sorry, I don't have any basis to judge.
Okay.
I'm in the same situation, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we have in this article I just put into the record about from the Business Financial, the millions of green jobs that the President Obama promised have been slow to sprout, disappointing many who have hoped that the $90 billion earmarked for clean energy efforts in the recession-fighting federal stimulus package would ease unemployment, still above 8% in March. Supporters say the administration overpromised on the job front and worried that a backlash could undermine support for clean energy policies in general. A 500 million job training program has thus far helped fewer than 20,000 people find work, falls short of its goal. So I think the question I now want to direct to is Dr. Roscoe. Isn't it true that the report says that the results, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, that report, cannot be attributed to the 1603 grant program alone? You understand the question?
I'm sure, if I do, I'm sure that's correct.
The results presented in this report cannot be attributed to the 1603 grant program alone.
Yes, I'm sure that's true.
Okay. Some projects supported by the 1603 award may have progressed without the award, while others may have progressed only as a direct result of the program. Therefore, the jobs and economic impact estimates can only be attributed to the total investment in the projects. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I think in general for any program like this, that would be a fair thing to say.
Yeah. Also, the report's jobs estimates should be interpreted as gross rather than net estimates. Do you think that's true?
Yes.
Okay. The model used by DOE to arrive at their estimates does not account for displacement of jobs or economic activity related to changes in utilization of existing power plants, electric utility revenues, and household and business energy expenditures. Neither do the jobs and economic impact estimates account for possible alternative spending of the federal funds used to support the 1603 program. Is that a fair estimate? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman? Okay. Okay, I think my time has expired. I'll recognize the gentlelady from Colorado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I want to talk a little bit about the themes I was talking about in my last set of questions, which are we really need to find savings, and we need to cut programs that are inefficient or not useful towards our overall long-term energy goal. On the other hand, I think we do need to, in a fiscally responsible way, invest in energy for the future. And so for example, in 2009, as we've heard in this committee, the Chinese government poured $120 billion in their government funds into renewable energy, $45 billion on the electric grid alone, while the United States just invested $20 billion. And most of that wasn't in direct investment in energy development. So, Mr. Johns, I want to know how much the department has requested for energy, renewable energy initiatives in the 2013 budget.
It's approximately $2.3 billion.
And that $2.3 billion includes a 29.1% increase in funding for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, what do you intend to do with these additional funds?
I highlighted one of the particular areas a few minutes ago, the Advanced Manufacturing Initiative. That program invests broadly in solar, offshore wind in this case, and other key investments with a focus on those areas where we can provide groundbreaking research, help get things deployed where appropriate. We've reduced, to your point earlier about reducing spending, we've reduced spending in those areas where we think there's no more real government gain to be made by
where you've got established industries that are going forward without
Exactly right.
the government support.
Onshore wind, some of the hydro programs, this kind of thing, where we're making shifts in our investment, where we're reducing funding in those areas that are more mature, reducing funding in some of the grid and other investments, fuel cells, where we no longer, the government just doesn't need to play a role anymore.
Those industries seem to be moving forward on their own. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
And for these additional investments that you're doing, what kind of accounting oversight do you have to make sure that those funds are being efficiently spent?
For those funds that are already appropriated, we are increasing pretty dramatically right now our transparency into the numbers and into the actual progress on those. Meeting with senior leadership, bringing them this kind of information on not just the status of the funding, though that is important, but also their progress in reaching the performance measures that they've established.
Okay, now Mr. Friedman mentioned about the ERA money, how quite a bit of that still has, while it's all been appropriated, some of it has not been dispersed. What is the DOE doing to get the rest of that money out the door? And what are you doing to ensure that the Venn diagram he talked about comes out just right?
Yes. He had it exactly right in terms of there's a tension there between spending the money fast and spending the money right. We focused on getting money obligated, which means that work is being done. We are now being careful about the rate at which we then pay the bills. We haven't received bills in some cases from contractors and from states and from companies. So we're very careful in making sure that the work has been done. For example, on weatherization, each home has to be inspected before we can sign off that the work has been done, and therefore it's appropriate to pay the money. So it's these kinds of measures, in part through the work of GAO and IG, that they've recommended that we are being careful about the rate at which we then
So when is that all going to be dispersed? That's my question.
It depends on the program, but as you heard, some of it has a deadline of 2013. The money as originally appropriated had a deadline of 2015. So we're working to get it out as quickly as appropriate, but we don't want to get the money out before we can confirm that the work was finished.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Dr. Rusko, GAO came out in February of this year with a report on federal renewable energy initiatives, and based on its review, GAO found that government-wide 23 agencies and their 130 sub-agencies implemented nearly 700 renewable energy initiatives in fiscal year 2010. I guess my question is, was it possible before February of this year to effectively identify fragmentation or duplication across the various federal renewable energy initiatives?
I believe that this inventory of these initiatives, this is the first time this had been done.
All right. And so prior to that, there would not have been a comprehensive inventory of these programs?
That is correct.
And do you believe, or do you have any idea how much money might be saved if we were able to eliminate duplication in these programs?
We were unable to get to that point. It took us all the time we had just to create the inventory. We're looking at key technologies within that now in 3 individual studies. We're trying we're looking at solar, wind, and battery storage, and we're trying to get some more granularity so we can determine if there's potential duplication.
Okay. And when do you expect that to be done?
All 3 of those reports should be out this summer.
Mr. Johns, any idea whether or not the agency will be willing to work with those duplications, even if it means shifting one of the programs somewhere else?
As I've said before, we take very seriously the recommendations from GAO. We'll be in the middle of our 2014 budget process if it comes out this summer, so we would certainly take a look at those. All right. As the chairman said at the beginning of the hearing, and I would agree completely, we're not looking to spend a dime more than we should spend. We're looking to spend money on the missions we need to spend the money on, but if we can find, or if GAO and IG find places where we can make reductions, then we're absolutely interested in this.
Because it doesn't really matter how we got here or which administration did what. The bottom line is we know that our country needs to save money, and we need to do whatever we can to find it. Isn't that correct?
My mission as a civil servant is to do exactly that, to make sure that we're spending the money that we have wisely and that we're not
and to eliminate any spending that we don't need to be spending.
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Friedman, in your prepared testimony, you noted that the IG added operational efficiency and cost savings as the preeminent management challenge for 2012. Your testimony also points out that the future may well entail funding levels that simply make programmatic status quo unsustainable and which may require rethinking the fundamental structure of the Department of Energy and its operations. Would you be willing to expand on that for me?
Well, yes, Mr. Griffith. We felt that it was time, after being in this business for a long period of time, to sort of think outside our comfort zone. And given the realities of the situation and the seeming consensus on the fact that the budgets going forward are going to be diminished and much more austere, we decided to take the body of knowledge that we had gained over many, many years and come up with 5 big-ticket items that would fundamentally change the Department of Energy and potentially save significant amounts of money. And we identify the 5 in the testimony.
All right, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to pick out your favorite one and tell me about it.
What my favorite one is?
Yep.
Actually, there's several that are my favorite, but I certainly think the department's technology centers, the federal funded research and development centers, there are 16 of them. If this were a for-profit business, we think it'd be time to say, hey, can we afford 16 with a 35% to 40% overhead for running each of those laboratories? Is it time to rethink the number of laboratories? Does consolidation make sense? If this were your business or mine, we would have done that already.
All right, very good. And you've got time to tell me another, since you said there were several.
Well, the department spends about $1 billion a year on physical security. We have, of course, some of the most sensitive sites in the United States. We think each site uses a slightly different approach or multiple approaches to obtain the Pro-Force guards. These are paramilitary, very well trained, generally contractors. We think there are ways of consolidating these contracts which would result in economies of scale, common training, common arms, reduce the cost dramatically.
Because I do believe it's a bipartisan, as you stated. Going forward, I think it's a bipartisan effort. We have got to try to live within our means. We can't continue to spend money that we don't have. And I appreciate your efforts in that regard, and I appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I think we're all done. I'm just going to take a little liberty here as chairman to ask a couple questions here. And I want to talk to the ATVM loans. When I say a 30% subsidy rate, do you understand what I mean by that? Okay. To date, DOE has closed 5 loans totaling $8.4 billion on the ATVM loan, which is the Tesla and the Fisker, those kinds of automobile subsidies. And there have been no new loans closed since 2011. And there's $4.2 billion, I understand, remains authorized but unobligated for loan subsidies. Is this correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that possible you could give this money back to the taxpayers?
The loan program is currently reviewing multiple applications. I don't know the status of those individual applications right now. Mm-hmm. Certainly money that's not needed would be given back to the Treasury, but it's not something that I can speak on.
Since $3.3 billion has been obligated for ATVM loan subsidies on $8.4 billion of loans, this is a subsidy rate of 39%. Is that correct? Take my word for it. It's correct. How do you explain an actual subsidy rate of 39% when 30% was established for the program in the beginning? You're the budget director. Why?
I don't have an answer for you.
Okay. All right. Dr. Rusko, in your testimony, you noted that at the time of GAO's review, DOE could not be assured that projects would be delivered as agreed. Can you explain what you meant by that?
With respect, yes, with respect to the ATVM, yes, we felt that well, according to the program guidance, they were to have technical engineering expertise on the ground at the time that the loan amounts were dispersed for keeping track of key milestones, technological milestones, and making sure that the companies receiving the loans were meeting those milestones before further disbursements were made. And at the time that we reported, the program had not acquired that expertise, and we felt
so basically the DOE had not established sufficient performance measures so that you could assess the program.
And that's true as well, that they had not at the time established measures that would identify the fleet energy savings associated with the program loans.
Mr. Freeman, anything you might want to offer on that? I mean, I think it's a little shocking to hear that the DOE did not even provide sufficient performance measures so that the GAO could even understand what's going on. But anyway, Mr. Freeman.
Well, one of the issues that we've raised in terms of lessons learned is the need for due diligence and metrics that allow program evaluation in an intelligent way.
Mr. Roscoe, we understand that several loan applications have been denied by the Department of Energy. Are you aware of that?
I'm sorry, which loan?
Some of the loan guarantees have been denied by the Department of Energy.
Yes.
Okay. One applicant stated we have been forced to say ankle. Have you heard about that?
Not that specific case, no.
But why have no new loans been approved in your estimation?
I think that there are a number of loans that have reached conditional commitment, including several nuclear loans, and those I believe are still, well, they're still working through the licensing process, and it's unclear whether at this point when those loans will be issued. I think there is some systemic and a problem with the way that the 1703 part of the loan guarantee program works, and that's that for many of the innovative technologies, they have to pay their own credit subsidy costs. And the fact that they're innovative means that they're going to be somewhat risky, and those costs may be very high.
Maybe if you could just dwell on the ATVM loans, and not in general, just in those.
Yes, since we looked at that, I'm unaware of the status of ongoing loan applications. I know there are some that are being considered.
Would it be fair to say that since they're not approving any new loan applications, they have $4.2 billion of unused budget authority for this program. Is it possible some of this money could be returned to the Treasury and we could help to balance the budget with it?
Again, I'm unaware of what the current status of the loan applications are.
Just return it to the Treasury. Mr. Friedman, any comment on that? Just return the money to the Treasury.
If you're asking could it be done, I'm not an appropriations law expert, but I see no reason why it could not be done.
Mr. Johns, any reason why that $4.2 billion couldn't be returned to the Treasury?
Well, as I said, we're the loan program office is actively reviewing existing loan applications. I can't tell you the status of those.
All right, I think we've completed our questions here.
Mr. Chairman?
I think Mr. Waxman's supplemental memo. We had a question for Dr. Rusko. On January 31st, 2012, DOE loan guarantee request by Herb Allison. He states on page 5 that DOE estimated loan subsidy for existing loans was $2.9 billion, while he estimated $2.7 billion of savings of $0.2 billion or $200 million. Is it fair then to claim a savings of $2 billion on future loans that have not been awarded? Does that make sense to you?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, this isn't related to the Waxman memo in which they make a claim about the loan guarantee request by Herb Allison. I guess the question is, they're claiming savings of money. Can you verify, corroborate this savings?
I'm sorry, I'd have to look at that and get back to you.
I think that's a fair estimate of your response. I mean, that would be my response because it's a little technical. Yeah, unanimous consent is going to order. I'm just going to put it in the record. How do you feel about that?
I feel excellent
Good.
about it. Thank you,
I agree
Mr.
with that.
Chairman.
Okay. Just in closing, Mr. Johns, can you report to us now on the number of vehicles in the DOE's inventory, following up on the Chairman Barton's request in which he asked you to define it precisely down to the 4 wheels?
That's a different question. I can't tell you number of wheels, but
I'm just sort of making
tell you,
trying to be the light on this.
Yes, sir. The current number in the fleet is 15,108 vehicles, as he suggested, 15,000. The target for 2013 is 9,484, reflecting a reduction over time of the number. I would want to point out, though, that this is not just the cars that are sitting in the parking lot. This counts all of our vehicles, to include the trucks that we use to transfer nuclear material from one place to another, the bucket trucks that we use for the grid, this kind of thing. So some of these are highly technical and highly specific vehicles. It's not just a matter of everyone in DOE gets a car. I assure you I have not been given a car by the department.
Yeah, because there's 15,000 employees and you've got 15,000 cars. It would appear that everybody has a car, but you're saying there's extrapolatory evidence here that they're using cars for things that are project-oriented and not used for personal use.
And these are also cars that are available at the labs, so this is also being used by the contractors as well. So this is 15,000 vehicles for that total number, 115,000 people. Again, as I said,
115,000 people, not the contractors. You mean just the employees?
It includes the contractors.
So the 100,000 in contractors would also get access to a DOE car?
Because this is not just cars. We, as a department, are paying for the contractors, the work of the contractors.
Couldn't they buy their own car with their own funds?
This is not just those. These are not just personal. These are not just vehicles for them to drive back and forth with. These are vehicles for them to do the work that they do every day. The bucket trucks, these trucks to move nuclear material.
Well, the more I listen to you, I get a little more concerned because you said you have roughly 15,000 vehicles, and you're saying that the contractors, which is 100,000, get access to these. That's a little disturbing because DOE should control the cars under the DOE budget, and you should not let private contractors have access to government property. These are private companies. Why would they get access to private companies to use their vehicles? So maybe you should provide us a more detailed breakout if you can, and so I won't put you on the spot any longer, but I'm a little confused now.
Well, I certainly can provide more information to you, but the point is that there are vehicles that we as the Department of Energy need to do our work. There are certainly cases where the private contractor is providing their own vehicles, but in these cases where we have highly sophisticated equipment, moving nuclear material, for example, bucket trucks, this kind of thing, where we are paying a contractor to do a mission for the Department of Energy, in some of those cases we have government vehicles that we are supplying. As I said before, we're not happy with that number, which is why we've engaged in this effort to reduce the size of the fleet.
I think if I were you, I would look to make sure that a private contractor who's getting paid by you is not using your vehicles when they should be using their own.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure. Mr. Friedman, you want to add to that? Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Gett.
Mr. Chairman, the private contractors would include, I think what Mr. Johns is trying to say, I'm not giving an opinion on whether they have the right amount of cars or not, but I think what you're trying to say, Mr. Johns, is some of the contract employees are like employees at the labs.
Correct.
And so when they're on site at the labs, they're using government vehicles there. It's not like like you folks are assigning passenger cars to contractors to drive back and forth to work. Is that right?
That is correct.
I think what would be really helpful, since the chairman and Mr. Barton are both very concerned about the number of vehicles, and me too, is if you guys could give us a breakdown of the types of vehicles, passenger cars versus these other types of vehicles, and where they're cited, and what your plan is for reducing the number of vehicles, so we can. So instead of using this like a sound bite, 15,000 employees, 15,000 cars, we can actually see what these vehicles are, who's using them, and what the reduction plan is. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mr.
Can I clarify one
Sure,
earlier
yeah.
statement, Mr. Chairman? I suffered a senior moment when asked about the number of criminal cases we have ongoing, and I want to make sure I clarify the record so there's no misunderstanding. It's not a static number. It goes up and down depending upon the times. I said 350. The actual number is between 250 and 300, and I misspoke, and I apologize for that.
That's fine. All right. I think we're ready to conclude. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their patience in staying with us, and also for the members who are participating. I remind the members they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record, and I ask the witnesses all agree to respond promptly to those questions if they're given to you. And with that, the subcommittee is adjourned.